Hi, and welcome to today's PASS Business Intelligence Virtual Chapter session. My name is Scott Murray, and we have a great presentation today. We are excited to have Gil, and I'm going to Raviv, and I know I didn't probably pronounce that correctly, but he's going to be doing a presentation on Power BI. Before we get to the presentation, as usual with all the different PASS webinars and such, we've got a few slides that we're going to go over before we get to the presentation. Just of course a mention, as we're getting close to the PASS Summit, there's still time for you to register. You'll make a note there that it's basically next week. It's really the creme de la creme of SQL conferences, and you get to meet folks from all around the world. So definitely a wonderful opportunity for learning. They wanted to make sure that we emphasize the Birds of a Feather luncheon, and that's going to take place on the 26th, and it's a way to sort of talk to folks. You get little blurbs, I like to call it, or little short presentations on a whole variety of topics, and so it's kind of a neat thing to do for a lunchtime area. This is I kind of was interested in. It's kind of interesting to see them selling PASS logoed stuff, but it's going to be available online. They'll probably also have some of this at the summit itself. You'll notice that all the upcoming chapter meetings are pretty much taken care of. Next week's going to be a kind of a down week, so you're not going to see many type of virtual chapter meetings, but be sure to take a look on the calendar for next month. There's always plenty of opportunities for learning that take place via the virtual chapters. Of course, we're preferential to the Business Intelligence virtual chapter, but there's plenty of other chapters that are available. You can go out and actually sign in and be able to see all the different chapters that are offering upcoming events. So, in addition to the virtual chapters, of course, we also have chapters that are related to geography, for instance. You'll notice in the list here that there's ones that are focused in on certain areas, certain languages. There's also those that are focused in on functional areas. So it's not just a functional area, it's also a location that's available. SQL Saturdays, kind of the same thing. Not many SQL Saturdays are going to be going on the next couple of weeks, but you can see there's a variety of opportunities for learning. The SQL Saturdays are free. Generally, you just have to pay for lunch. They're a wonderful, wonderful learning opportunity that you can take advantage of. And they'll be within, most folks have them within a few hours drive from where they live. So these are great learning opportunities that are free of charge. Also mentioned, speaking of SQL Saturdays and then other events that come up, there's always an opportunity to volunteer. We love here at the virtual chapters, especially Business Intelligence. If you want to present, we're more than happy to take a look at your presentation and offer you the opportunity to do a presentation. These are a good way to jump into if you want to speak at SQL Saturdays or eventually speak at the PASS Summit. Those are definitely opportunities to do that, and there's plenty of other volunteer opportunities that are available. And then, of course, we always want you to stay involved with what's going on with PASS, and you can do it via LinkedIn, via Facebook, Twitter, and of course just the regular SQL PASS website. So those are all methods of communication that PASS uses for you to keep in touch with the different comings and goings that are happening. So at this point, I'm going to actually turn it over to Gil, and he's going to speak for about 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes. And of course, as we're going through the process, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and post them in the GoToWebinar questions area. At the end of the presentation, we'll take some time for answering those questions. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gil, and we'll talk again in about 45-50 minutes.
Hi everyone, I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Gil Raviv. Scott, you pronounce it very good. You may know me during 2015. I was in Microsoft Excel team responsible for the integration of Power Query into Excel 2016. That's where I started to be quite involved in the Microsoft AI stack. Today, I would really like to show you some very powerful capabilities inside Power BI, and we will use sentiment analysis to analyze some of the things that are really, at least, very actual here in the United States. What we are going to do today is to take Donald Trump posts from Facebook and take also Hillary Clinton posts from Facebook, compare between the different posts, and see the sentiment analysis and the number of shares that they get over time to really, on the fly, for the next 45 minutes, we will build with Power BI quite astonishing dashboard that will measure their social analytics activities, engagement, and also their messaging, how much they are negative or positive in terms of sentiment analysis. Okay, so before we begin, just to let you know, I also have a blog called datachant.com. Inside that blog, you can search by the tag sentiment analysis. You can also see the URL here, and we will share it with you later on. You can find many materials, articles that explain some of the things that we will do today, and also drill down to many more. So let's start. Okay, so we are starting by opening the Power BI desktop. So I have here a Power BI desktop file with few queries that I prepared in advance, and I will show you to you in a minute. But 95% of what we are doing today is really from scratch. We will begin by getting Donald Trump posts. You can see this is Donald Trump specific URL or the page object name that you can use in order to access is Facebook. And now what we are going to do is move to the Power BI desktop, clicking in the Get Data option, selecting Online Services, and selecting Facebook and clicking Connect. Okay, now if it's the first time for you, you may get some warnings regarding third-party services. Let's ignore that. Facebook once in a while can change their APIs, and Power BI cannot guarantee that everything will work 100%. So let's click Continue here. Now you can see the default Facebook dialog recommend you to get data about yourself. In my case, I don't want to get data on myself. I really want Donald Trump. So I will change the text here to Donald Trump. And I will click OK. Okay. The query editor opens. And you can see that Facebook, that Power Query extracted a record with all those attributes about Donald Trump page. Now, I will show you what you would get if you will try to do it by yourself without my tips and tricks. So basically, if you will just use the Power Query experience without my specific workarounds, you will click here on the connections, for example, and then you will click on the feed here or the posts to get the Facebook posts. But you will see in a second that this thing will not work for you very well. Okay, you see, we have some kind of a Facebook error in this case, which means that something is not working correctly. Now, I must admit that the Facebook connector in Power BI is not 100% perfect. There are many things that you need to tweak in order to make it working, and you will see one of those now. So I will go back and delete the navigation step. And again, we will go to the first step here, and I will manipulate the data that I have here. I will change the version to 2.7. Okay. And I will also add here posts. So I would like really to directly go inside using the Facebook Graph API to the posts themselves. and I will also use a limit of 100. This limit doesn't really block the data for only 100 records. It just tells Facebook that we will use in iterations where we will want to get all the data, but each iteration will consist of only 100 records. By default, the Power Query engine asks for 150 records, and that's why you saw the earlier error. So by using limit equal 100, we are working around the Power Query bug. Now we will also add here fields, because we would like to ask for specific fields, and we will write here message and shares and created time. Let's see if it works for us. I'm clicking enter, and now you can see that I was able to manipulate the Facebook Graph API to be able to load the data that I wanted. More specifically, the reason that I used shares is because the Power Query technology will not work very good for me if I will try the likes. If I will try to extract likes, this method will not work, and there are much more advanced ways to also extract the likes. But for this 45 minutes, let's focus on the number of shares each post gets, because in this scenario it works much better for us. So now when we have the message, we have the created time where the message was posted, we have the post ID, we can remove the object link record, we don't need it for this scenario, and we can expand the shares column by clicking this specific expand icon to the right of the header. Okay, let's click OK now. Now we have the number of shares each specific post by Donald Trump received. So we can also measure the engagements. Let's also change the created time into daytime time zone. We are converting that. We can also change the shares count into whole number by clicking this small icon that represents the type of the column. We can also change the name here to shares. Okay, so we have the message, we have the shares, we have the created time, we have the ID. Now I'll show you some other tricks that we will use later on through the report itself. So the ID, for example, here can be manipulated also to include the actual URL in Facebook. So for example, you see, if I will just copy this ID and I will now switch to my browser and add here, change from Donald Trump to the ID itself, you can see that I will go directly to the specific post the Donald Trump team published. So this is really helpful for us, and we can use it also inside the query editor. So we will create a new column. I'm clicking on Add Column tab, clicking on Add Custom Column, and now I am manipulating the query expression formula here to add a new column that starts with the Facebook URL. Okay, and I also concatenate that with the ID. Let's call this one post URL and click OK. Now you see that I have a new column with the actual link that we will use later on. By the way, I have some bug here. I forgot to add here the slash, so I will add it here. If this is the first time you are using Power Query in a query editor, you may not see the formula bar, so you can go to the view, and here you can enable the formula bar. So you will also have for each step the specific formula. So I just added a slash here, and I click now enter. Now I have the correct URL on this side. Next thing that I would like to do is really to do the same thing also for Hillary Clinton, and then append all the data together to a single table. So to do that, let's start by there are several ways to do that. I will show you today the easiest part, but there are other ways to do it in using a function. You can imagine that you can use the same technology, the same technique, to load dozens of different Facebook pages, and to that you will be able to use function queries. But for today, let's do it in the faster way. So I will just change this query to Trump. This will be the name of my query, and I will also add a new column. Let's call it candidate, and this column will just have the values of Trump. Okay. Now we can go again to the Trump query, right click on that, and select the duplicate. Let's duplicate the query. So we have Trump 2. And let's change Trump 2 to Clinton. Okay, so now we have Clinton, and we just need to change 2 elements in the query. The first one, it was the last one. Remember, we just added a custom column called candidate, where we have Trump here. So now we will just change that to Clinton. Okay, and the last thing is we will go to the Facebook Graph API. Remember where we started the journey by importing Donald Trump posts. Now we will just change Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton. So let's just make sure that we have the right object name. You see, this is Hillary Clinton Facebook page. So I can copy this part from a page in the Facebook URL. And back to the query editor, I can now paste Hillary Clinton instead of Donald Trump. I can now click enter, and you will suddenly see after the preview will load part of the data, you can see now that we have the messages from Hillary instead of the messages from Trump. So we have now one query for Trump, another query for Clinton. Some things that we can also improve in this area is to add instead of the date and time, to duplicate this column. Let's duplicate this column by selecting add column, date, and we will just click on the date only, because we want a new column that only has the dates. It will be easier for us to create hierarchies on the visuals. So now I have a date column here on the right side. Let's repeat that very fast for Clinton. Ideally, I could do that before the duplication, but it doesn't really important for now. So I also have the date for Clinton. Now I have Trump and Clinton with all the data that I need. And the next step is to append between the two. There are several ways, but for now, let's just right click on Clinton, and we'll use the reference. So now you can see I have a new query called Clinton2. And this specific query, let's call it all candidates. Okay, so we have a new query with all candidates that only start with Clinton. The next step is to go to Home ribbon in the query editor and click the Append Queries here to the right. And I will also select Trump because I started with Clinton. And I will click the OK button now. And now I have in the query all candidates, all the data for both Clinton and Trump. Let's just show you that we have both of them. I'm just using the filter here to see that we indeed have the two. It'll take some time. Perhaps too much time for us. So let's just believe me that we have the two of them in the append. Another important thing for us now for this scenario, because we don't have so much time, is, as you know, both candidates started their public career much before this election, so they probably have a lot of Facebook posts before they even knew that they are going to be candidates. So let's filter all the data that we have here only to data to posts from this year. So I will go to the date, click on the filter option here, select date filter, go to year, and I will select this year as the filter because we only want 2016 status updates from those candidates. That's it. We have everything that we need now. Now, as you recall, we started with Trump and Clinton, but since we want to create a single table in the data model for both of them, we don't really need to load these two. We only need to load the all candidates. So I can right-click on Trump and uncheck the enable load and do the same thing for Clinton. Uncheck enable load. Now you can see that both Trump and Clinton queries are disabled. They will not be loaded. Only the all candidates will be loaded and will access those other queries to fill the data. I can now click the close and load. And you will see that all the data will be loaded for 2016. It takes a few seconds. Let's just see that everything works for us. Okay, waiting. Hopefully it will be ready quite soon. Yeah, we are on our way. So while we wait for this operation, okay, now we finished. I also would like to show you an example of how we can disable the load for the next time. So now you can see if I click on the data view, you see that I have in the data model a single table with everything that I needed. We also have here two tables. The reason we have two tables is that I also prepared in advance the following table. Let me show you. So I have a table called candidates. And the way that I created this table was to click on enter data. And in enter data, let me show you, I just pasted these values. I didn't do anything advanced, just wrote Clinton and Trump with their Facebook pages names and a link to an images that I prepared in advance that has the Democrat and the Republican logos. And we will use it in a second. Okay, so automatically when we loaded all candidates, Power BI Desktop recognized that we have in candidates table the field candidate, and it associated it with the field candidate in all candidates. So now if we will go to the report, we can create a custom slicer that I really like. This is the chiclet slicer. You can import it into Power BI as all other custom visuals by clicking on the three icons here, but I already uploaded that. So I will use the chiclet slicer and I will assign the candidate to category, and I will assign the URL. This is the image, the logo, to images. And just because values need something, let's just drag another column to values. And now you see that I have a slicer with both Clinton and Trump. So if, for example, I will go to all candidates here, and let's just add a measure, for example. I really prefer using explicit measures than just dragging and dropping columns to all kinds of fields. So let's create a new measure, count of posts, that will just use the count rows index to count all the candidate posts. Okay. Now, if I will select one of the visuals like the stacked bar chart, and I will assign the candidates from the candidate table to the axis, and will assign the count of posts. You see this little calculator icon, it tells us that this is a measure, an explicit measure that we created. I really recommend you to use only explicit measures in values in Power BI visuals. So when I take it to value here, the count of posts, now you can see that we have how many, we can see the total number of posts during 2016 for each candidate. Let's also bring the candidate to the legend here and change the colors. We don't need the legend. Let's take the legend off. Let's also take the x-axis off, and let's use data labels instead of the x-axis. So now we have the numbers. We can also format the numbers by clicking on the measure count of posts. And now in modeling, we can change the format to numbers. So you will see the thousands separator in the data now. And let's also change the colors. For example, for Republicans are usually red and Democrats are blue. So we can go to data colors, and Clinton should be blue and Trump should be red. And now we have something that's starting to make sense. So these are the number of posts. Now let's also measure their performance, how many posts they have every month. So I can now, let's copy and paste this specific measure, change it to, let's change it into area chart. Oh, sorry. We'll go here, we'll change it to area chart. And now, let's see, this doesn't make a lot of sense. We'll change the candidate to legend. We will assign the date to axis. You can see automatically Power BI detected that the date is actually a date column. So it created the hierarchies of year, quarter, month, and day. Since this is not a financial data, I really prefer to remove the quarter. So we have year, month, and day. And now I can switch the visual into a drill down mode by clicking this arrow. And when I will click on 2016, now you can see that the data expands and we have the number of posts for both candidates on each specific month. If I will copy this visual and will add here for all candidates a new measure that will calculate the average of shares, let's try it. So average shares equal to average, and we have all candidates shares, and let's see what happens when we take the average shares instead of count of posts. Now you can see this is the average shares that each candidate has. You can see that Trump is doing much better by average. So the average shares for each post is much higher than Clinton's. Okay, so we started some, these are really very basic engagement monitoring. You know, we can click on Clinton and Trump just to make sure that the slicer is also working. You know, I really like to do that even if it doesn't make any sense sometimes. But now let's move to the more interesting part, which is the sentiment analysis. Okay, so I will go again to Home and click Edit Queries. Now, what we are going to do is to take all the candidates' data and use a very powerful service by Microsoft called Microsoft Cognitive Services. Let me show you that website. Okay, so I really recommend that you will go to that website, microsoft.com cognitive-services, and seek the text analytics API there. You can sign up for free for this account. And Cognitive Services provides really very awesome APIs that performs many different machine learning calculations around image processing, and also around languages and text analytics. So in our case, we are going to use a specific text analytics API, which is performing for us the sentiment analysis. I already prepared in advance an account, but just to show you how this account is quite interesting in terms of the pricing. So you can get for free 5,000 transactions per month. On each transaction, you can squeeze 1,000 different messages. Each message can be more than 10,000 characters. So it's really an amazing service, which you can start by free. And for our case, 5,000 transactions per month, it equals to 5 million different messages that I can monitor for free. Okay, so we'll start now by copying the specific API key that I have here. Okay, it is now masked with the X character, so but I can click the copy to get it. I can also show you the specific key. You can show it on your specific account. And back to Power BI desktop file, I created in advance a function that I will share with you later on. By the way, I will share with you the entire Power BI desktop file, so you will be able to learn what we did together in your own safe environment. So this is a query that I prepared in advance. This is the M language, the Power Query formula language or expression language. Many of us call it M. This is the unofficial name for that language. So here in M, this is a function that gets a table, receives a table, convert it into a JSON format that the Microsoft Cognitive Services require. You can see, for example, here, this is the URL for the REST API, including the host name, cognitivemicrosoft.com. And specifically, we call for the sentiment API call with a lot of information that is needed for the specific API call, but you will see how easy it is. Once you copy the function that I created in advance, you will see how easy it is to use that. And the important thing here is that you will either need to paste here the API key that we just got from the Cognitive Services website, or instead, in my case, I created a parameter in Power Query called API key. So this is the reference for the parameter in Power Query. Let me show it to you. I created it in advance. So this is the parameter, and I just pasted here the specific key which is on my account. Okay. So to do it by yourself, you can just go into the Manage Parameters here, create a new parameter, and here you can just create the parameter that you need and paste here the specific API key that you have, and you can then use that parameter on other queries. And by the way, you can also create a template that will use all this data. So for example, when I will share this report with you, it will be in a template and not in a report, and you will need to fill in the specific API key for the Microsoft Cognitive Services. Okay, so let's continue with the demonstration. Okay, so remember we had a function called get sentiment results that we prepared in advance, and I showed it to you here in the advanced editor. And we have the API key. The API key is used by that function. Now back to all candidates. I will right click on all candidates and use the reference option. And now inside the reference option, I would like to save, to use only the message and the ID. Again, to get into this dialog, I click choose columns under home ribbon, and I can also instead just delete the other columns that I don't need. But in our case, we want message and ID. And now, since the Microsoft Cognitive Services API requires specific format, which includes the column name text instead of message, I am changing the column to text. I change the column ID. I keep the text column ID as it is now. And the next step is to make sure, and let's do it from here, we need to make sure that the ID is not duplicate. And we also need to make sure that we don't have any null values in text. Some posts on Facebook are received empty for some reasons. For example, if I will just share a link without writing any text on my status update, you will not have any text here. So let's remove all the empty values by clicking the filter here on text and click remove empty. And let's also remove duplicates. Facebook has some bugs, or perhaps it's the Power Query connector, the Facebook connector, that some of these IDs are duplicate and we don't need those. So I will select the ID column and I will go to remove rows in Home tab, and I will select under remove rows the remove duplicates option. I click remove duplicates here. Now I make sure that I have a single unique key for each of the posts and I don't have any duplicate text. The next step, since the cognitive service, the sentiment analysis API can handle 1,000 different text messages in a single call, I would like to group all the messages into subgroups of 1,000 messages each. To do that, I would like to create a new column. So let's go to the add column here, and I will click the add index column. Now you see that I have a new index with a number, a running number for each row. And I would like to convert this index to be 0 for the first 1,000 rows and 1 for the next 1,000 rows, and so forth. To do that, I will go to Transform tab. We'll click the standard number column transformation here and select the integer divide. And I will use here the value 1,000 and click OK. Now I have in the index zeros for the first 1,000 rows, 1 for the next, etc. I will go now to the group by under transform. I click group by. And now I would like to group everything by the index. And instead of counting the rows, I just want the subgroups. So just for cosmetics, I call this column subgroups. And instead of count rows, I will go to all rows. This is a very neat trick in the query editor that allows you to group tables into separate subtables. So that's it. I will have a new column subgroups with all the rows that have the same value under column index. Let's click OK. And you see that now we have 5 different tables. Each table consists of 1,000 messages that were originated from the previous step. The next step for us is to go to add column, click on this nice new, relatively new button called invoke custom function. Now we will select our function get sentiment results that we prepared in advance. You can see automatically the Power Query technology detected that column subgroups as a table, which is needed as an attribute for get sentiment results function. So we can click OK. And now the query editor goes to the sentiment analysis API to perform all the functionality, all the API calls to get the data. You see I have all the data here. I can delete the first 2 columns. I don't need them anymore. And I can expand the column here. And let's click OK. We can select only the documents. We don't need to see the errors at this stage. You can select errors when you try it if you want to troubleshoot some errors in the API call, but for us, we don't need it for now because I am sure that we don't have any errors. So you see we have now a column with different lists on each row. Let's expand that by clicking this button. Now we have a lot of records. Let's continue to expand that. Everything here is in a JSON format because of the REST API. So it's really very easy just to use the usual buttons on the column level to expand. And now you see that we have the ID and the score. Let's uncheck the use original column name because we don't need the original name. We just want ID and score here as the column names. And voila, now we have the post IDs and the sentiment. The sentiment is a number between 0 and 1. 0 is the most negative text. 1 is the most positive text. Let's change it to decimal number and change the name of the query to sentiment. Okay, we are ready to go. We can go now and click close and load to. Now we will need to wait probably some 20 seconds. This is the moment where we are going again to Facebook Graph API to get the entire data set, to get the data, and to send it later on to the sentiment analysis API. Okay. Sometimes it's a bit tricky to use real data. You need to wait for the data to load, but in my case, I'm sure that it will be ready quite soon. While it is loading, in case you are not really familiar with the Power Query elements in Power BI Desktop, I really recommend you to start learning it. It's a powerful tool. It allows many users to become self-service ETL masters without the need to learn a lot of complicated things. You can even achieve 90% of many scenarios without knowing anything in the M expression language. You just can use a very easy UI to do most of the scenarios to achieve those. So you see now everything is loaded. Let's go to see how the relationships are done. So you see automatically sentiment and all candidates got a specific relationship automatically due to the fact that ID is the same ID type column is in sentiment and also in all candidates. Now, it's funny to see that this is a one-to-many relationship, though this should be actually a one-to-one relationship. The reason you see here many is because I forgot to remove the duplicates messages in all candidates because there are some few posts for some strange reason that are duplicates here. But we can remove that, but let's hope that for now it will not cause any problems. Okay, so now let's go to the sentiment part and add here another measure. Let's call it average sentiment, and we will use the average here to get the sentiment score. Now again, you could just use the sentiment score instead of an explicit measure, but explicit measures are much more reusable, so that's why I created one here. Now if I will just copy and paste this visual, and instead of the average shares, I will drag and drop the average sentiment. Okay, let's also change. I will select average sentiment and fix the format, in modeling tab to a number, and add the thousand separator here. Now automatically you see that I have only 2 decimal places with the thousand separator, and this is the data. And you can see quite interestingly that the sentiment that you get for each month is much higher for Trump than it is for Clinton. So Trump has a much higher sentiment than Clinton. Now we can also check the variance, for example. So let's also add here another measure. Let's call it variance. Sorry for my accent. Just a minute. Okay, let's use var p and sentiment score. Okay, and now we can also convert this one to add the thousand separator with two decimal numbers. And now when we will do a copy and paste for this visual and use, instead of the average sentiment, we'll use the variance. Now you can see with the variance really helps you to see how each candidate is fluctuating in terms of his sentiment. So you can see that while Trump is very, on the average, is much more positive than Clinton, he is also fluctuating much more than she, okay, than her. So here, two examples of how creating sentiment. Let's just spend the last 2 minutes to show you something even more powerful. So imagine that we want now to find how many negative posts we have, and let's split the specific scores to 3 ranks. So I can go here to the sentiment table, and I really like to add another column here that will tell me whether the score is negative, neutral, or positive. We can do that in many ways, but for this demonstration, let's add a calculated column here. So I click in modeling the new column, and I will call this column rank, or sentiment rank equal. Now if, and this is the same if that you have in Excel, if sentiment score is below 0.3, I want the value to be negative. Otherwise, if sentiment score is higher than 0.7, I want the sentiment rank to be positive. Otherwise, I want it to be neutral. Okay. I'm closing everything. You see that I now have a new column, calculated column called sentiment rank, with positive if it's above 0.7, neutral if it's between this high threshold and 0.3, and negative for below 0.3. Now, if we will go back to the visual here, and we'll add another, let's add another visual now. Let's just add this one, and I will drag the sentiment rank to the axis, and I will drag the shares that we had before, the average shares measure that we created previously. I will drag it to the values, and let me also drag the candidate to the legend. Okay, now what you can see here, you see also blank is for the post that didn't have any text, so we didn't send them to the sentiment analysis. Let's just drop them out. We can drop them by going just a minute to the visual filter, to the sentiment rank, and remove the blank. Okay, so now you can see, and this is, I think, quite interesting, you can actually see how many shares each specific candidate receives. And let me try to do a copy to paste the format. So I'm using the format painter to use the same numbering, the same colors here. and also go to the, where was it? To the average shares to make the modeling in the decimal number format. So you can see that we have, these are the number of shares that each candidate receives for the negative posts, for the neutral posts, and for the positive posts. Okay, and I think this is quite interesting because if you will check it in a different way, for example, here in this specific chart, you really can see how Trump, for example, is much more engaging as he become negative. You see, all his positive shares gets only the total, the average is 9,000 shares. It grows when the status updates by Trump is neutral, and it really grows much more when it is negative. However, when you check with Clinton, you can see that she's red. Yeah, sorry for that. So red is Trump. You sometimes say, blue for boys and red for girls. I'm doing the confusion here. But so that was Trump. You saw that it grows when the sentiment become more negative. And with Clinton, you see that it actually, when she's neutral, it's like her status updates when she's neutral is a bit boring. So her engagement is lower. And then when she's negative, it's again higher than from her sentiment, from her status updates when the sentiment was positive. So again, it's another way to correlate between the engagement levels and the sentiment for those candidates. Okay, so I think we are done for this demonstration. I will share the file with you later on, and I will be happy to answer questions if you have.
Yeah, so if you do have any questions, feel free to go ahead and post them in the Q&A area for the GoToWebinar panel. It's normally the third or fourth little panel or tab down. We do have a couple questions. One person asked if you could share the initial connection you used to Facebook again. They wanted to kind of see that process. They missed it in the initial go through.
So we go to the Trump query and select in implied steps the first step. You can see this is the call. The connector is facebook.graph. This is the formula in Power Query expression to use the Facebook, to import from Facebook. And it just receives an API call, an URL, which is used as the API call, the Graph API call by Facebook. To learn more about the API call, you can just go to Google and search Facebook Graph API. Everything here is using that URL with all kinds of specific attributes to access the entire dataset by Facebook. And again, in Clinton, we did the same. In Clinton, we just used Hillary Clinton here instead of Donald Trump.
And we've got a couple more questions that have popped up. Does the refresh work once you publish it to the Power BI portal?
Very good question. So the answer is no. The only way to refresh Facebook in Power BI service is to refresh it on the desktop side. So you will need to refresh it inside Power BI desktop each time. However, the way that I work around this is to implement this entire scenario inside Excel. So you have an Excel file with all these queries. You can actually copy paste everything into Excel, into the Power Query in Excel. And when I upload this Excel to SharePoint to OneDrive for Business. I can use VBA or other automation to refresh the Excel file. And then Power BI service will have automatic scheduled data refresh on an hourly basis with the data refresh. So I need a client-based refresh mechanism to make it work.
And that is all the questions that we have. Another person said, appreciate the presentation. Thanks, Gil. Another one said, amazing session, very useful. And that is all. Let's see. Well, one more just popped up. How will the PBIX be shared? Is the question that came up.
Great. So let me show it to you now. So this is the file that we have. I will go now to do, I will go to click the export button here, and I will select Power BI template, and I will click OK. Now the file is saved as PassBI VC with PBIT. This is the extension for the Power BI desktop template file, and I will click Save. Now if I will go to that file, let me just open that file to show you what you will need to do. Okay, just let's find that file. Just a second. Okay, when I double click on that file, the Power BI desktop file will open for you, and you will need to paste the API key from the Microsoft Cognitive Services from here. Let me show. Okay, so after you sign up to the Microsoft Cognitive Services, you will have an account. You can go to that service. Make sure that you sign up for the Text Analytics API. Then you can click on My Account, and you will have the key in that specific page. You have two keys that you can use for that reason. And when you open the PassBI VC template file, you will see API key. You will need to paste the key here, and click Load, and then everything will load for you.
Perfect, perfect. Just two more questions we'll have, and then we'll kind of go ahead and end for today. Somebody asked, is this the same sentiment analysis as the add-in that's in Excel?
Not exactly. This is, I think, much more easier also in terms of the fact that you can really automate the entire scenarios. So the add-in that you have in Excel uses the Azure machine learning service. Perhaps in the back end they are using the same service.
Okay.
But this Microsoft Cognitive Services API is the one that you can really use without any additional machine learning related configuration. By the way, the add-in in Excel doesn't automate the API calls and perform 1,000 messages per call. You get a single text message for each call in that specific add-in. So the scenario that I showed you today is much more powerful.
Okay, I agree. That was neat. Very neat. Then the last question we have is someone asked, with the API key. Okay, wait. Why did you split the data into 5 groups again? And I'm not sure exactly.
Yes, this is a good question. So.
Oh, they're there. Okay.
Yeah, so let me show you. So basically, before we did the grouping, you see these are the 5 groups of separate tables. Each table consists of 1,000 records. Now, I could, instead, if I have less than 1,000 rows in the original table, if your data is smaller than 1,000 rows, you don't need to do that. But if you will try to push the entire table in a single API call, and you can do that, you can try that. But if you will do that, the cognitive service will return an error because it doesn't recognize more than 1,000 messages per API call. This trick allowed us to take a larger data set than 1,000 rows and to send 5 different API calls for the Cognitive Services API.
And that is all the questions. So thanks for the presentation today, Gil. I very much appreciate it. I know the community, the business intelligence community definitely appreciates it. Well received. Power BI is so neat. There's so many things that are going on with it. So definitely a plus. As mentioned at the beginning, we will be posting the recording on the Power BI virtual chapter YouTube channel. It may take a day or two. We've got to download it. It has to be converted and then get it back, uploaded up to YouTube. So it'll take a day or two, but that'll be presented on the YouTube channel within the next couple of days. And look for our next presentation coming up next month. We're still working on a couple of dates, but be on the lookout in your email for those. So again, thanks, Gil, and thanks for everyone for participating. And we hope everyone has a good rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone. It was a real pleasure to be here.
Bye-bye.